He passed Fyodor Mikhailovich Dostoevsky through himself. We know how interesting conversations about Dostoevsky with Father Andrei are. We are confident that we are about to have a very interesting hour or two. Father Andrei, you have the floor.
Hello, friends. I feel sorry for you sitting in the sun. Actually, out of compassion, it would be best for us to disperse. Dostoevsky, if he were here, would say, "Listen, go into the shade, let's stop all this mockery of people." Well, I see. So yes, there is no need to show off your courage and heat resistance, no need to faint or pass out, in short, do not, just hide. Well, that's what we've got. All right. So, look, there is such a veneration of writers, some famous people, in which people quote. Well, this applies to all of us, our entire civilization, the Wikipedia civilization, where we know many quotes from different people, but we have not read more or less of their works from beginning to end. This applies to any great person. The Wikiquote can throw us all sorts of expressions, and we already seem to have acquired some partial wisdom for ourselves. Here is the first thing I would like to tell you about Dostoevsky. By the way, we could conduct a poll, raise your hands if you have read, and so on. We are not going to do that, but I must tell you that it is considered a necessity, even a duty, for a Russian person to read at least one of Dostoevsky's novels from cover to cover. I am sure that if he reads one, he will read the second, then the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and then everything else. Of course, I am not talking about his early works now, not about poor people, not about white knights. I am talking now about the so-called Dostoevsky's Pentateuch, according to Justin Popovich. This is The Brothers Karamazov, this is Demons, this is The Idiot, this is The Raw Youth, and this is Crime and Punishment, of course, yes, the very first. And now, without any doubt, every Russian person needs to read it all. This is especially important today, as people are slowly turning away from books. Well, not slowly, they are severely turning away. By the hustle and bustle and the ubiquity of video content, they are used to listening more than reading. By the way, you can also listen to Dostoevsky. Surely they are audiobooks. If someone happens to go by car for a day or two through the vast expanses of our motherland to the sea or elsewhere, they can also listen to some Dostoevsky novels. But we need to be doing this. So simply honoring him from afar, erecting monuments to him, that's good. But he needs to be read, because the magical property of his works, it does not leave a person indifferent. It takes him by the scruff of the neck, as I understand it, and then drags him through all the corners of the human soul. Reveals to a person such a shakiness of the present. That is, the present seems so unshakable to us. Solid ground under our feet, blue sky above us. Everything seems to be so right. Dostoevsky, when he enters our soul, he shows us that everything is sewn on a very thin thread. The world can be torn apart from top to bottom, like the veil in a church, at any second. We're walking on thin ice. When you read Fyodor Mikhailovich, you acquire with him the magical ability to recognize miracles in everyday life. Some people think that Dostoevsky is very far-fetched, that his characters are grotesque, that there are no such people in real life. In my deep conviction, there are only such people. Such characters, as those of all other writers, definitely don't exist, but such as those of Dostoevsky, starting with Lebyadkin and ending with the old lady pawnbroker, for only such people do exist in real life. Everyone can talk about Dostoevsky, because he is a very huge person, and anyone can walk around him in circles. On the other hand, what specific shall I offer you in the second? First of all, I ask you not to forget that if you haven't read Dostoevsky from cover to cover, now, if, for example, you haven't read Crime and Punishment, then be kind, put everything aside, and within 2, 3, or 4 evenings, even instead of evening prayers, don't be surprised. Some will say, oh, what? How is that? I'm telling you seriously. If you have been praying for years, but you haven't read Dostoevsky yet, feel free to put aside your evening prayers for a couple of evenings. Well, with the exception of the Lord's Prayer and the Hail Mary prayer, and in a few sittings, swallow Crime and Punishment in one fell swoop. This will be more beneficial for you than a long time of reading the same prayers in due time for years without a tangible result. After all of us more or less understand that we read, but the cart is still upon the selfsame spot. And there are very few such events in spiritual life that shake us from top to bottom. One of such events is war, by the way. In war everyone is closer to God. The most godless, the most frivolous, the most wicked person in war is shaken from top to bottom and suddenly approaches God. And what 25 years of ordinary life did not give him, 2 hours of being on the front line can give him. War has a deep religious meaning, a profound religious meaning. Times are shrinking, everything is compacting, and a person can understand in half a minute what he, a fool, couldn't be driven into his head in 20, 30, 40, 50 years of civilian life. The novels of Fyodor Mikhailovich have the same magical effect of compaction of times, shaking up the soul. So, it's not even worth discussing. Each of us, not excluding me, should reread these books from time to time. And those who have not read them have simply sinned. There were people, and not the worst people on earth, who said that they had specially learned Russian in their old age in order to read a couple of pages from Dostoevsky in the original. Do you understand how precious these texts are? If a Russian person speaks Russian, the language of Dostoevsky, and has never read his books, why all these conferences, lectures? Why are they all needed, if we are talking about something unknown, distant, well, as it were close, but incomprehensible? You know that the hardest thing to recognize is what's under your nose. Here we have such a thing as emigration. Russian emigration. There were several waves of it. Well, clearly, after the revolution, but there were several more subsequent ones. Everybody was going for their own reasons. Some were going just to save their lives, some were going to protect their faith, some were going to find civil liberties, and some were going just to eat sausages of 40 varieties. There are different waves of emigration, but they have something in common: they love Russia more than people living in Russia, many of them. Because we got used to it all, to these birches, this speech, these birds, these rivers, these domes, these crosses, these bell ringings, these sins, these saints. We've got used to all of this, we don't feel it. Those who love Russia the most are not the ones who live in Russia, but those who are Russian in their soul and outlook, but for some reason do not live in Russia. Either he is a son of emigrants, or some other misfortune has thrown him abroad, or his relatives have been thrown, and he was already born there. They, I assure you, love Russia and feel Russia more. They feel her, because the separation enhances their love, and they understand more about our life than we do. Inside is always less clear than outside. Exactly the same happens with the Russian language and with Russian writers. In principle, we speak Pushkin's language with minor changes until today. In the literary part. Of course, we speak the language of Mayakovsky, the language of Brodsky. Today, we increasingly speak the language of rappers and all sorts of other new verbal forms. We are losing the Russian language, but it is so powerful that it will never disappear. But we, the native speakers of Russian, are obliged to read the best books in this language. Otherwise, why? What's the point of all this? If, let's say, Albert Einstein said that several pages of Fyodor Mikhailovich's works give him more than the best treatises of some mathematicians or physicists. That is, he is able to shake up the soul. It's an earthquake. That is, you who have read the Demons to the end, you feel the same catharsis that Aristotle wrote about. Why do verbal genres of art exist at all? Drama, poetry, prose, and everything else. It exists for the purification of a person. In order for you to come into resonance with the narrative and go through all the circles of hell after the author and go out through the bright doors, achieve purification, the so-called catharsis. And Dostoevsky is capable of this. He is able to take you by the scruff of the neck, shake you in such a way that everything flew out of your head at all, then put you on your head, then back on your feet, and you'll suddenly realize that you live in a wonderful world in which, right, the devil and God are fighting for that very immortal soul. This all concerns us. Right now, in this very moment, unique people live around you who stand with one foot already in hellfire and the other in heavenly abodes. And they are swaying between these two realities. Your world will be completely different. It will be complicated, incomprehensible, sometimes even terrifying, but it will not be vulgar. Dostoevsky said that we all grew from Gogol's overcoat. And Gogol fought against vulgarity all his life. And Gogol believed that vulgarity is the worst of all sins. When a person is mundane and primitive, when all his interests are limited to the question, what are we going to eat tonight? And when he goes to bed, and what shall we eat tomorrow morning? And, is the weather good, Martha Petrovna? The weather is excellent, Spiridon Semenovich. And what shall we eat in an hour? And so life passes hour after hour, year after year, and nothing changes in it. This is what appalled Chekhov and the best people in our literature in general. So, Gogol thought that vulgarity is such a chlorine that eats away life more terribly than any other sins. It happens that a person who has sinned will suffer so much from the sin he has committed, will cry so much that this will be another person. A sin with repentance, strange as it may seem, is much better than a monotonously meaningless existence with absolutely material interests, without any spiritual flight. This is actually a scary thing, and so Dostoevsky does not let a person live in such an orderly reality, when he is only interested in salary, pension, social benefits, the weather for tomorrow and the opportunity to go to the sea for the summer. That is not the way to live, according to Dostoevsky. This may be how an American thinks, to make a career, achieve the American dream, and deposit a large sum into their bank account and calm down. Like I made myself, life was a success. But not a Russian. If you remember, those Russian boys, when Alyosha and Ivan meet therein, the brothers Karamazov, what do they talk about? The brothers haven't seen each other for many, many years. Siblings meet, one of them is a novice of the monastery, the second of them is a student, a learned man who has imbibed all kinds of poison, along with smart things, he has gained all kinds of skepticism, and pride, and everyday madness. They meet, haven't seen each other for a long time. They have already grown up and matured without seeing each other. And they ask each other. Two Russian kids, well, young men, are sitting in a tavern. And they don't ask each other, do you have a girlfriend? Well, let's say it rougher, have you already slept with a woman? How much do you earn? Do you have a car? And, in general, what are you going to be in life? How do you want to live, etc.? They, having not seen each other, came together, asking each other, Leshka, tell me honestly, is there a God or not? Tell me the truth. The two brothers haven't seen each other for 20 years. Well, not 20, but they haven't seen each other for 10 years. They met after a huge period of time. And they don't talk about anything else, only, just tell me honestly, is the soul immortal or not? Is Christ really risen? Is there a God or is there no God? Tell me how you feel. Just don't lie to me. Don't say, well, Mom said that there is, the priests say that there is. What do you think yourself? Do you understand what they care about? This is a Russian man. He should be like that. And how can we be like that when we are, as if struck by a dusty bag from around the corner, and we only think about material things, about earthly things? Well, we work for the toilet, to be honest, so by and large. What are we working for? What will remain after us? A refrigerator full of uneaten food. God forbid you die today, and what will remain after you? Clogged boxes with all sorts of junk and a refrigerator full of grub that you didn't have time to eat. That's it. And what else? Nothing. We will be forgotten after death in 2 weeks, because what have we left behind? To whom did we wipe the tears? Whom did we sate? Whom did we save? Whom did we pull out of the noose? Whom did we help to buy a house? Which woman we kept from having an abortion? In which monastery did we cry all nights long? What have we done at all? Nothing. And so we live in such completely degenerate coordinates. And in order not to be a degenerate, to be a Russian person. Because, in fact, a Russian person needs to know, not how much the dollar will be against the euro next month, and not how much a barrel of Brent crude oil will cost. Someone needs to know that too. Well, let them know. And in principle, a Russian person needs to know, why the hell do we live at all? Why should we suffer at all? Does this even make sense or not? And in the end, tell me honestly, does God exist or not? He does exist. What a grief it would be if he did not, and why would everything be needed then? But that's not the point. The point is, that one has to prove it, one has to argue about it. The Lord God, as an obvious reality, should not cause any doubts for us at all. The question of whether he exists or not is the curse of Western thought, actually, which came to us along with skepticism, rationalism, and all sorts of isms. In short, I repeat, as in school, you know how it goes. Got it, repeat. So, if you haven't read Dostoevsky, and if you don't pick up his book tomorrow, then you're living in vain in this world. He should be read and reread, and memorized, and digested, and then talked about with others. So that you meet your friend at some shopping center. And she says, "Oh, Lucy, hello. Oh, hello, Klava. How are you doing? Listen, have you read The Brothers Karamazov?" She says, "No." "Well, then I have nothing to talk about with you." She turned and left. Now that's what I call a meeting of Russian women at the mall, you know. And people don't really have anything to talk about, actually. Like in Mayakovsky's poem, the street twists and turns without a voice, unable to shout or converse. That is, people have nothing to talk about. They are forced to talk about other people's sins, their own sins, gossip, rumors. Do you know what he did? Do you know who she's with now? Do you know what's going to happen there tomorrow? That's what they waste their time on. In fact, Russian people should talk about the meaning of life. And until you've read all of Dostoevsky's books, or at least one from cover to cover. Well, then what is there really to talk to you about? About what? To quote and to convince of something? This is necessary just to be a Russian person. I had several people who, regardless of anything, let's say, I come to one of them, he stands with his eyes filled, with his eyes full of tears, with a book open, poking his finger at the chapter of the Russian monk in The Brothers Karamazov, and he says, "Is that exactly right? Is it really the way it is written? Is it so? So if this is true, then let's go, I'll be baptized." The guy wasn't baptized yet. Dostoevsky brought more souls to God than all the priests put together. Do you understand or not? And yet you haven't read him. What is it? What kind of swinishness is this? I swear to you, he brought more souls to God. After all, he exists in Japanese translation, in Hindu translation, not to mention English, German. Nietzsche read it excitedly before his death, and he studied Russian for this purpose. I personally know a Japanese man who came to Russia to study engineering. And along with engineering, he fell in love with Russian literature here. He learned the language at the Zero courses and began to read Chekhov first. Japanese people love Chekhov for some reason. In fact, the most performed playwright in the world is Chekhov. The most performed playwright in the world is Chekhov. And the most played composer is Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky sounds every second in the world. His works are either rehearsed, or performed in a concert hall, or listened to on a tape recorder, or played as a ringtone on a phone. Tchaikovsky is the most sounding composer of the world. Chekhov is the most staged dramatist of the world. Dostoevsky is the most brilliant writer of the world. This is both Dante and Cervantes, it's all together in one. And yet, we do not read him. He cannot be read at school, he should be read by adults. To read his works in 5th grade is a crime, and in 9th grade, it's a punishment. This is not right. They should only be read in 11th grade and then in college. And adults should voluntarily, independently engage in this reading. For what? To be a Russian person. At least for this worth a lot. Prince Mishkin in Dostoevsky's The Idiot says that the world has not yet heard the Russian word. We are moving into that step, so to speak, into those historical fields in which the word should sound. The Russian word. The Russian word should be a word about Christ, about the fact he is still alive, that he is the same yesterday, today, and forever, about the fact he has risen, that he is alive for every person, and all this needs to be said somehow in Russian. Well, with such a patois, such a Tambov one as that of Father Ambrose, or with a quip, like that of Saint Seraphim. That is, the world has not yet heard the Russian word, and we must say it all together. That we should not live in order to fill our pockets with money, only to later throw ourselves into the grave like swollen worms, bury ourselves in soil, and be forgotten. And goodbye. This is not a human life, I apologize. A human is not something that fits into the grave. A human is the being for whom every night the Lord scatters stars across the sky. For each and every person. This is a crown. The starry sky is a crown over the head of every person. A human is the being for whom the whole world is created. Yesterday I was sitting, talking to a person, and this person says to me, "Look at the cloud." Well, look at any cloud now. And this person says, "Is it beautiful?" I say, "Very much. The Lord created this for you." This is how a Russian person thinks. The whole world is beautiful and it is all for me. Not for me to devour it all, like a cancer cell. Mine. What I don't eat, I bite. No, it's for me to enjoy and contemplate this world and that small piece of land that is my property, let's say a garden or an orchard, so that I can cultivate it, preserve it, and beautify it. So that the area around my house is clean. And so that at the back of the house there's some little garden bed, with some parsley on it, and a ficus on the windowsill, and the window is clean, and a book with a bookmark open on the table, and a small lamp in the corner, such a small paradise. Man was created so that everything around him would be good, and everything within him would be good, too. And around him, there would be paradise. God created man for this. And how can this be understood by a modern cropped, like a mule, overloaded neurotic who wakes up already frightened and tired? Have you ever noticed that a person wakes up not rested, but tired and frightened? He jumps out of bed, takes a shower. God, there's still a whole day ahead, it's still necessary to live it. Mamma mia, and he ran. And that's it. Did God create people for such a life? No. And we were instilled the opposite. That people were created to run and earn, to stare and envy, and talk about all sorts of nonsense. Therefore, when you read the Demons from cover to cover, you will understand what demons are in everyday life. What it is. Who they are. Whom they possess. Through whom they rule the world. It will be a very interesting knowledge. You know, for example, when the Demons were published, the revolutionary underground press fell silent in Russia, and the frightened revolutionary movement quieted down. One book. When they read it, everyone gasped. Is that it, right? Yes, that is it. And those who realized that it was written about them, they fell silent and stopped printing their proclamations. They realized that they were revealed, they were simply disclosed. You understand what one novel is. One that is read at the right time and written at the right time. Now look. In the end. Well, yes, since these words have already been heard here, I heard Anna talking about it. There is such an expression, well, it's among philosophers in the West and in the East, for example, Oswald Spengler and Justin Popovich say, there exists the civilization of Faust. The civilization of Faust. Faust is a legendary medieval scholar. Scholars then studied everything at once. University education assumes that you will have a certain universum, a certain universe of knowledge, a complete universe. Therefore, they studied anatomy, medicine, law, philosophy, logic, rhetoric, theology, physics, geography. They studied everything in order to have a university, universal education. Not a narrow technical one. I know how to deal with sewing machines, and I know how to deal with, say, cow dung. So that's all, but I don't know anything else. And so, there was a universal scholar, a certain Faust, who wanted to know everything and yet did not have happiness. And he made a deal with the devil and sold his soul for power, for that ephemeral happiness, for the pleasures as he understood them. Goethe reworked it all. Goethe didn't invent it, he just wrote it down in beautiful German language in verse form. So, there is the civilization of Faust. This is the civilization of the West, to which we also belong. We have all the sins of the West, starting from the venality of people going into power, ending with perverted sexual activities. All that they have, we have too. We need to scold the West with caution because we cannot say, you have it this way, and we have it differently. There is no such thing. All that you have, thanks to you and us, we also have. You have such, and so do we. But in your country, this is already considered the norm, but in our country, people are still embarrassed. So there is the Faust civilization. It is a civilization of pride, it is a civilization of great knowledge, it is a civilization of world power, and a civilization of lack of happiness, on the background of which this strong, domineering, intelligent man, strong, domineering, intelligent and unhappy man, is ready to sell his soul to the devil. Even the devil, the real devil, not a caricature, the real one. Just to get what he cannot get. He himself doesn't know what. This is Western civilization. It is a civilization of intelligence, power, strength, and unhappiness. That is, I have everything, but I don't have happiness. I know everything, but I has not come to know myself. I can squeeze the whole world into a fist or burn it in the atomic fire, but I can't change myself. I seem to be everywhere, but I wasn't inside my heart. I went to the Himalayas, I went to Rome, I went to Milan, I was in New York, but I wasn't inside my heart. This is Faust. He is perpetually unhappy, he knows everything, and suffers. And he is ready to sell his soul to the devil. This is the West, not in the sense of the geographical West, them. This is Western civilization, to which we, unfortunately, also seriously belong. And all our wickedness, it partly has kind of a sanction of this civilization. So, to replace the civilization of Faust, for it is coming to an end. The civilization of Faust is coming to an end. It is croaking, it's deflating like a balloon. By the way, before our eyes. Either the end of the world or a new civilization must come to replace it. And the new civilization that could come to replace the civilization of Faust is the civilization of Dostoevsky. Just his. Because he bothered to outline some of the spiritual and mental foundations of a normal, God-blessed communal living of intelligent and educated people, who today in fact make up half of the world. He managed to say very important words about the need to see a brother in your neighbor and humble your pride and recognize Christ as the first and last value, as Alpha and Omega. He has it all. That is, Dostoevsky needs to be read so that, as we have already said, there is something to talk about with a friend, something to think about, so that he turns your soul around, so that you can feel like a Russian person. And in order for you to understand certain spiritual seeds of the foundation of the civilization that should come to replace the dying, amen, the sooner the better, civilization of the West. It was not entirely bad, there was a lot of good in it. In that same America, 25 years ago, all people in any town or village went to churches on Sundays. All people. These were not Orthodox churches, there were churches of Methodists, Baptists, there were some other Quakers there, whoever you want. Or Catholics, or someone else, but there was no such house where people would stay in their homes on Sundays or go to a store, or a pool, or for mushroom hunting. On Sunday. 20 years ago, the entire one-story America dispersed to the churches before noon. And in their churches, they sang hymns, read the gospel, praised Christ, and tried to somehow get closer to God. Then, they returned home, fathers put on jackets and ties, mothers put on beautiful dresses, children sat down at the table with their parents, and everyone had lunch together. And only in the evening did young people go dancing, while fathers sat down by the fireplace with a cigarette. This is how the whole of America lived 25 years ago, well, maybe 30. And suddenly, swiftly, over the course of several decades, all this disappeared, vanished into thin air. And we haven't had that for the last 70 years. Out of the question, only 3, 4, or 5% of our population goes to church. We still need to teach people to go to church, to help a person. By the way, Dostoevsky contributes to this as well, I assure you. For example, we have more women going to church, well, for various reasons, including the fault of the clergy. There is a big mistake made by women themselves and the clergy that men do not go to church, because they are afraid that women will command them there too. I'll pour it myself. You know? Because when you lead someone somewhere, you command the one you are leading in such a disgusting way that he is afraid that you will now. Not only does she bug me at home, but now she'll take me to church and bug me there too. Whatever, I'd rather go fishing. I understand men. In our spiritual life, there is too much sentimentality, which is very necessary for women and absolutely not necessary for men. These all sorts of cuddly, la-la, tra-la-la, women need all this, men don't. A man needs smart food. A man needs to know liturgics, history, dogmatics, homiletics, the history of the local church, the history of the universal church. He needs a lot of knowledge and a burning spirit. A woman needs a lot of tears and emotions. And our church tradition seems to please the female soul. That's why we do not see men in the church, and when women pull them along, they balk even more. Because God did not give women power over men. He did not. Instead, he gave women power over other women and over children. As for men, the Lord should reign over them. The head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man. So, you would like to bring your husbands to church, but you are not succeeding. And your sons, and sons-in-law, and nephews. But it doesn't work out, and it doesn't work out for us either. We are as powerless as you. And Dostoevsky is stronger than us. Because if your son-in-law reads The Idiot or The Brothers Karamazov, he will run to church himself and understand more there than you. Even though you have been going to church for 8 years, and he will come for the first time. Dostoevsky has such a message, such power. So please take this power. You understand what a book is. It's like sheet music. For example, I can't play musical instruments and I don't read sheet music in principle. When I open a music notebook, the notes are silent for me. Imagine a musically educated person opens a music notebook and the notes come alive for him. He starts humming the melody to himself. He understands what is written there, and if he can play, he sits down at the piano, and suddenly we all hear what is written there. But without a musically literate person, the notes are silent. The notes begin to sound only when read and performed by a musically educated person. Then it's not just a notebook with hooks, but it's a divine melody that makes you cry or laugh or, I don't know, go into battle, or confess your love. This is a sacrament. This is the sacrament of turning paper into sounds. It's the same with books. There it stands, for instance, that same Bible that we also don't read. This is a crime, you know? A crime with punishment, only the punishment comes later, and the crime is now. That is, we know how to read, we have the Bible, but we don't read it either. It stands in silence until it is picked up. As soon as you pick it up, open it and start reading. Oh my God, where did it all come from? And it starts to sound, it changes you. This is a property of the best books. They, being open and read, begin to have a powerful effect on you. And you won't be the same as you were. You'll be different. Well, regarding the motivational aspect of reading Fyodor Mikhailovich, I think that well, of course, I will repeat for the 7th time what I said before, because that's how a modern person is. He forgets everything he was told 5 minutes ago. People only remember the last phrase. What I will say in the end, the last sentence before saying goodbye, that's what you will remember. And what I've said before, only your subconscious will remember it. It can only come to you in a dream, and in reality, it is forgotten. But people have become like that, you know. People have become very shallow, not tenacious, they do not cling to flying meanings. Here's the meaning flying, and you should catch it, and grab it and don't let it go. This is your wealth. A person is rich when they have something to think about. You know, like when there were all these camps, all these nightmares of the 20th century. Soviet concentration camps, German concentration camps, English concentration camps, Austrian concentration camps. Because, for instance, our funny liberals shout, Stalin, 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 Stalin. Yes, Stalin, Stalin, it's all clear, but concentration camps were invented in England and first used in the Anglo-Boer War. That is, the very principle of concentration camp was invented in England. We only joined in later. And the first concentration camps in Europe were in Austria, and they were against the Russian population of Galicia. And only later came Stalin, Hitler, and all that. But the liberals remain silent about this, for they have black mouths and vile souls. Well, never mind them. So, the modern man, yes, he spreads out, he becomes so small. He needs to be deepened in short. Although, in Dostoevsky's works, you will find something different. Man is broad. The Russian man is broad. He says, I'd even have him narrower. So broad that I would even have him narrower. The most important thing, you know. Let's say even since youth. What is Fyodor Mikhailovich? He was constantly concerned about Jesus Christ as a personality, and in his works, in Demons, one of his characters there, Shatov, says, God has tormented me all my life. He torments him. That is, the very last and very first question. It's not for nothing that God is Alpha and Omega. The very first and very last question of life is the question of the existence of God and our attitude to Him. Is there a God? Is there no God? There is, yes, good, Amen. And then what? And what do I owe Him? And what does He owe me? That's also the second question, right? Well, there is, and then what? And then there is the covenant. We are in covenant with Him. That is, we have a. What is a covenant? This is a contract. We have a contract with Him, a contract involving mutual obligations. He says, you must do this, and in return, I will do this for you. This is a contract, this is a covenant. That is, we are in a. Not only does He exist, but we are in a covenant with Him. That is, we need to renew our covenant relationship with Him. And we have a new covenant with Him, moreover. Drink from it, all of you. For this is my blood of the new covenant. We have made a covenant with God in the blood of Jesus Christ. And this topic is actually a revolution, it's a complete upheaval of consciousness. And all of this troubled Fyodor Mikhailovich since his youth. When he was still a member of the Petrushevsky circle, when he, well, messed around, in short, concerning the earthly paradise. People were sick of the idea of earthly happiness. They really wanted everything to be very good for everyone on earth. And whether there is another life in heaven or not, they were no longer interested in it, so to speak. The main thing is that everything is fine on earth. So he also describes all of that. What this all leads to. And when he was still fooling around with those Petrushevites, dreaming of the earthly paradise, he used to come to Belinsky's apartment. Here, for example, is how relevant all of this still is. Look, Belinsky at the end of his days. He died quite young, suffering from tuberculosis. You know what comforted him before death? He went to see how a new railway station was being built in St. Petersburg. And the construction of a new railway station instilled in his soul some kind of unearthly joy that when I die, people on earth will live beautifully, trains will rumble, airplanes will fly, wires will be stretched and people will talk by telegraph. Well, that is everything that exists now. That is, at that time, people thought that civilization would bring happiness to the world. They were not fools, they just thought so. They believed that civilization and science, we have science, there is such a thing in Dostoevsky's The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, that science would bring happiness to humanity. When they saw the first airplane flying across the sky, ridiculous by our today's standards, they thought, that's it, happiness is near, happiness is behind the door. People flew across the sky. Today we fly around like flies, and we don't feel happy. Well, I flew, I arrived, so what? Neither telegraph, nor telephone, nor television, nor refrigerator, nor microwave give us happiness. And in the 19th century, people thought that all this technical stuff, these electric wires, these microphones, these phones, that this would be human happiness. They were cruelly mistaken, of course, and so this Belinsky, already sick and with not much time left, completely in love with the future and completely hating the present. How do you like this characteristic of a person? A very scary characteristic, because there are such scoundrels who are completely in love with the future and completely hate the present. Or who completely dream about the past. In the past everything was good, today everything is bad, and tomorrow it will be even worse. How do you like this world view? And many people live just like this. People live like this. Yes, they don't know the past, but for some reason, they think that everything was really good back then, but today everything is really bad. Well, and tomorrow will be a complete nightmare. But in fact, the Christian worldview is not like that at all. We know approximately what happened yesterday. Well, we know something, of course, but yesterday it was not good either. Today everything is just fine, really. Today is just great. And tomorrow we need to work hard. Actually, it won't be easy, but there will be all sorts of things, both this and that. In the end, like a bride descending from above, the city adorned and prepared by God, it will all be ahead, it will all be good. So, I still can't get to this topic. And so they were talking there at Belinsky's apartment, and Belinsky was already such a consumptive, pre-mortem bilious man, and he often spoke so insultingly about Christ, about Lord Jesus Christ. Well, maybe you read Gogol's correspondence with Belinsky at school. They made us read it at school when I was studying, I remember. Moreover, we did not read Gogol's reply to Belinsky, it simply was not in the textbooks. But we did read what Belinsky inflicted on Gogol there. And there was such a nasty letter, such a terrible and unjustly bilious one, so aggressive towards that poor Gogol, towards Christ, and towards anything you can think of. Belinsky got carried away by the end of his life. And when he said something bad about Christ, the young Dostoevsky would wince, he would even shudder, because he could not understand how it is possible to talk about future happiness and swear at Christ. And Belinsky once said to him, look at this saint, how he winces when I talk about Christ. Understand, you naive man, Belinsky says. If your Christ were to appear today, in the 19th century when there are already railways, steam engines, electricity, tall buildings, civilization, your Christ would have been scared of this huge world, this civilization, and he wouldn't even have been able to say anything. He would have been afraid to teach anyone anything or preach anything. Because the world has become so complex, so big, so technical. And your Christ would have just been scared. I am specifically saying this now because you are listening and thinking. So think about it. Interesting, what would Christ have said if he had appeared not in the 19th century, but in the 21st century? When they have already delved into the genome, when children are grown in test tubes, when rockets fly to space, when, listen, trains already run faster than planes fly. So, into this world. What would have happened if Christ had come here? Think how important this question is. Would he be afraid of this whole so-called civilization? It's interesting. Don't shout from your seat. I want you to think, not shout. I don't demand answers from you, just because there are a lot of you. It's just inconvenient to have a dialogue. Just think. And the second man who was sitting there, Dostoevsky does not mention his name. He was just sitting there gloomily, thinking and thinking. Then he says, no. If Christ had come now, he would not have been afraid, he would have led our socialist movement. And what do you think? Dostoevsky recalls this phrase in his A Writer's Diary. In fact, these are two very tenacious phrases. Because many people still believe to this day that civilization has become so complex, so overgrown, so, well, obviously strong. Well, listen, we have such collective power that words fail me. That is, we have a certain collective power. Any nuclear power plant, any metro grid is a kind of indicator that people are terribly smart, energetic, persistent, and that they can revolutionize the world around them. What? Would Christ have been afraid of this? The second one says, no, he would have become the head of our movement. In fact, both of these thoughts are very important today. Well, first of all, for example, there is such a theology of liberation. It is very widespread in Latin America, where priests join communist and socialist parties and try to fight against poverty. And they believe that Christ was a revolutionary and that Christ, if he lived now, would have gone to the barricades, and he would have fought with the bourgeoisie for social equality. There is a whole continent, a whole Latin America, it's just completely immersed in it. There have been wars on this topic. It's all going on there to this day. There the clergy said the following words, the right words, it is a shame to be a rich priest with poor parishioners. We need to overcome poverty. It seems to be right, everything is fine, but then they took Trotsky, Marx, Lenin instead of the gospel, and they say let's make a social revolution. That's exactly what Dostoevsky had in his youth, the same thing. They believe that if Christ had come here, he would have led our socialist movement for justice. But I wonder, but what is the real Christ? Would he be at the head of the Communist Party? Would he be afraid of civilization? So it is necessary to cognize the real Christ. By the way, Dostoevsky says, in penal servitude, I recognized myself, recognized Christ and recognized the Russian people. Of course, Christ would not be afraid of anyone. Should he be afraid of anyone if he calls the stars fig trees? He says, the stars will fall from heaven, as a fig tree, shaken by a strong wind, drops its unripe figs. That is, for him these stars, he knows how huge they are, but for him, they are no bigger than olives on a tree. Why should he be afraid of a locomotive or a steamboat or some kind of shiggly car? These are funny toys for the Lord, of course. One must not know Christ at all to think that he would be afraid of something. He would do the same thing. He would heal, resurrect, open blind eyes, rebuke those who do something wrong, and so on. And in the end, they would have crucified him, most likely we ourselves. It would have been exactly the same. And by the way, Dostoevsky will write about this later. In The Brothers Karamazov, there is a whole separate chapter, The Legend of the Grand Inquisitor. Such a well-elaborated idea of Ivan Karamazov, where he says, I have such an idea, Alyosha, to write a whole book about the fact that Christ came to earth again. And he describes there. This really needs to be read, I don't know, as a separate book. There is even an entire literary movement when they consider this chapter about the Grand Inquisitor in The Brothers Karamazov as a separate book. Their Christ comes to earth in the 15th century in Spain. That was the time of the Reconquista. Spain was captured by the Moors and Arabs. And Catholic sovereigns like Ferdinand and Isabella expelled the Muslims and reconquered the Iberian Peninsula. It was during this time that the search for heretics and various inquisitorial processes began there. And it was at this time that Christ descended to earth in Spain in the 15th century. And there everyone recognizes him immediately, everyone rushes to him. He resurrects some, heals some, comforts some, everything becomes clear right away. And suddenly there comes an old monk, such an emaciated, much fasted old inquisitor, a general of the order of the Inquisition, and he orders them to take him, Christ. He gives the order silently. They come to him, they take him in shackles, by the hands, and into prison. And at night, this Grand Inquisitor comes to Christ in this prison and talks. He says, I recognized you. I recognized you, it's you. And he begins to unfold before him the whole picture of the future world. This needs to be read. If someone believes, say, in a global conspiracy, then Dostoevsky revealed it before anyone else. The whole mechanics of the development of mankind, its spiritual fall is simply dissected, like a frog in an anatomy lesson. That is, what we call progress is actually a deep human fall, and it will end in a complete turn away from the truth. Note to yourself, not just the evil one will be very cunning, and the Masons will be quite inventive. People will not want to worship the truth. People will love lies more than the truth, and will turn away their ears from the truth and will turn aside to fables. This is said in advance by Paul to Timothy. And then, when the whole world desires sin, legalized, permitted sin, satiety without effort, and lies, it is then that the great deceiver will reign over it. And all this rigmarole, all this machinery of this terrible worldwide rot, is shown there by Dostoevsky. Christ is completely silent there, he does not say anything at all, he just listens. And the Inquisitor tells him a lot of such very tough and interesting things. He says, you must not come to earth anymore. You gave us power, well, to us the church, the cardinals, the inquisitors, we will rule these people on your behalf, and you don't come anymore. We do not need you, you've already done everything. We will now rule in your name, even though we know it is not in your name. But we will say it is in your name, and they will listen to us, and we will rule over them. And you go away. Tomorrow, he says, I'll burn you like a heretic. And the people whom you have healed, who have recognized you, will obey me, not you. And it's necessary to read it with a pencil, actually. Because if you read only this, consider that you have read the most important text, well, after the Gospel, that has ever been written by a man. In plain Russian. In general, my friends, I will repeat, just because I understand that the last words are remembered more than the first ones. Then surely someone is going to ask something, and I will be able to answer then. Only if you ask about something, try to ask about things that concern everyone, not just you personally. That is, not a personal question, but one that generally concerns us, our people, our church, our families, and so on and so forth. Or about Dostoevsky, if you want. Something specific, because this is a bottomless sea, and I know that half of you have not read him at all. So, my task is to wind up your tale so that you run home, grab a book from the shelf and immerse yourself in reading basically. And then start reading the interpretation, explanation, literary criticism, and dive into these wonderful film adaptations. By the way, it's remarkable. We have recently had a number of film adaptations. The Demons were filmed once, or rather The Idiot was filmed with Churyakova in the role of the general's wife Yepanchina, with... What's his name? I forgot his last name. Well, okay. Recently, there was a film adaptation of Demons. Yes, there are still some other things being filmed. But the coolest film adaptation is The Brothers Karamazov by Pyriev. This is actually a singer of Stalinism. This is the one who filmed the tractor drivers, collective farmers, and all sorts of these. That is, the one who is such a paradoxical artist. He filmed an amazing adaptation of The Brothers Karamazov, with Myagkov in the role of Alyosha. Mitya. This is absolutely the strongest adaptation. By the way, you should also watch it. This is a very decent, great cinema. Then we have The Beautiful, The Idiot, by Pyriev, only the first part. The first part of the novel is filmed. Yakovlev there, God rest his soul, plays Mishkin absolutely amazingly. All of these also need to be watched because it is real cinema. Real cinema, cinema as art. Not something shot with a crooked leg, just in case. Filmed just to broadcast it and let it play there. It is great cinema. All of this needs to be taken and read, and then we need to talk about it. Monks, when they meet, should ask each other, "How are you praying, Father?" "Well, it's hard, brother." "It's hard for me too." "Well, God help you. May your prayer be strong, and may your prayer, brother, be fiery. Christ is in our midst. He is and ever shall be." They kissed and parted ways. This is how monks should talk. Priests should talk the same way. And lay people should talk. "What have you been reading lately, dear neighbor?" "Oh, hi there, Ivan Ivanovich. What book have you read? Were you at the service on Sunday?" "No." "Do you at least remember the Lord's Prayer?" "I don't know." "Okay, Ivan Ivanovich. In short, you are not a Russian man, it's all clear now. So, we need to awaken the soul of the people, you know, the national soul. I didn't finish one thought regarding concentration camps. When millions of people went through the experience of Austrian, English, German, Soviet concentration camps, they wrote many scary books about how it was there, what happened there, why, and how it all happened. And how could we have sinned so greatly that God allowed such things?
Что там, почему там, и как это все вообще случилось, и как же мы так сильно согрешили, что такое Бог разрешил.
Well, they wrote about a lot of things there. So, one writer said that according to his personal observations, the ones who have nothing to think about are the first to break and die.
В лагере умирают люди, раньше всех умирают, ломаются, и умирают те, кому не о чем думать.
The ones who have nothing to think about. He said that, for example, if people had some interesting attachments out there, in a free life before the camp, then they found people with the same attachments and they could live in the camp for another year, and 2, and 3, and 4. They had an outlet. For example, imagine, a gardener found a gardener. And so they dragged themselves to the barrack, barely alive and exhausted, and slurped some gruel. Then they got together somewhere there on the bunks and begin to talk about seeds, about, how did you grow tomatoes? And how did you hoe them? And how did you? And I had such a variety of asparagus there, you know. And I had broccoli growing there. That's it, they are in their own world, they are in a safe place. They have a place to recharge their soul. They forget that they are in the camp. If 2 chess players come together, that's it, they will forget that they are in the camp. They will be examining Philidor's chess game and Aliohin's defense. That's all. They have chessboards in their heads, and they are in paradise. They are not in the camp, they are at a chess tournament at that moment. Some philatelist will find another philatelist, and they will talk to each other for days on end about different stamps, extinguished, not extinguished, such and such. But for those who do not have a single interest in their soul, well, a person's interests may be simple, women, money, moonshine. There are neither women in the camp, nor money, nor moonshine. That's it. Should he hang himself now? And he doesn't have a single book read behind him, not a single poem learned, not a single page of the gospel by heart. There's nothing at all in his head, nothing. Only this hellish life, in which there are overseers, dogs barking, barbed wire, guards with machine guns, pour gruel and work to exhaustion. And you have an empty head and nothing to think about. These were the ones who died first. They rushed to the barbed wire to be shot. They rushed at the convoy to be shot, they hung themselves in the barracks because they didn't know what to think about. People die not from suffering, they die from having nothing to think about. This was said by people who have gone through this earthly hell. There is even another such story. There was, imagine, a music professor. I even remember his name. Olivier de Sourcia. He was a Frenchman, a devout Catholic. He studied birdsong and was a classical musician. And he gave lectures on the history of music to the prisoners in the concentration camp. Imagine, the poor people crawled into the barracks from work, these concentration camp prisoners of different nationalities. There could be Romanians and Gypsies, Jews, Russians, French and English. And he told them there the history of music, about musical notation, Pythagorean revelations in music, Bach, polyphony. Listen, what kind of music can there be in a concentration camp? But nevertheless, here's what happened. Everyone who came to his lectures, who crawled to listen to him before going to bed, before lights out, they survived. He gave them hope for an hour, for 2, for 3 before going to bed in this hell, and they forgot that they were in the concentration camp. He was telling them about this and that, he was humming to them something from Mozart, something from Bach, some familiar melodies. He was telling them why this is so, why this is not so, what the secret of this sound is, and they were transported by the mind to another world. And all those who did not listen to him, who came and said, "Who cares about music now?" went to sleep on their mattresses, only to wake up in the morning and go on to work. As a rule, they died. Because man dies last of all from lack of bread and water. First of all, he dies of senselessness. We all have bread and water today, but we have no thoughts. And in this sense we need these great writers so that you have something to think about, so that your head would be full of other people's quotes and images if all the books suddenly disappeared. Even in those same camps, damn them, which really crushed and broke some people, but also purified and saved a multitude of others. There, the gangsters had such a thing, they forced intelligent prisoners to squeeze a novel, as they call it. That is, for example, a leader of a gang sits there and rests, and some intelligent weakling tells him Romeo and Juliet, in a thug way. You know, the plot is interesting. It was called To Squeeze a Novel. They called them and said, come here, weakling, now you tell me something interesting. And they told them something about Tristan and Isolde, well, in jargon, so that the boss would understand. Even in this form, even criminals in their own wrong world, so to speak, need literature. They will not read, they will force someone to tell them in argot. Tell me Little Red Riding Hood in argot before I go to bed. Even they need literature, because they also need to think about something to live. I mean, even they need literature, you know? And all the more so do we. A person needs to have something to think about. In my opinion, Dostoevsky is one of those few who make a person, who fill a person with other meanings. Well, of course, all this is only a preliminary stage of the future. Because I think that and by the way, there is such a story by Chekhov, called The Bet. This story describes a situation in which people, during a dinner reception at a wealthy man's home in the evening, argue about the death penalty, about how humane or inhumane the death penalty is. And there the idea is expressed that if a person is put in prison for a long time, then it is no less cruel to him because the lack of freedom is even worse than instant death.
Жестоко по отношению к нему, потому что отсутствие свободы – это как бы еще хуже, чем смерть одномоментная. Бац и все.
And they argue about which is worse and which is better. And there is a certain young man who says, let's make a bet that I will stay there, I don't remember for how many years, I think 20. I will stay in the wing of your house for 20 years if you bring me, say, food, drink and what I ask for example, magazines, books, sheet music, cigars, well, anything else. They make a bet for a very large amount of money, because the young man is doing it voluntarily. They sign it and notarize that, if I go out of this detention just to take a walk outside even an hour earlier, it means I have lost. And if I win, then after the end of this term, you will pay me some huge sum of money. And so he sits there, and it's described what he does there.
Ему нужно
He
чем-то
needs something
заняться,
to do
чтобы с
so
ума
as
не
not to go crazy, and he asks for literature.
Сначала он берет
First,
всякие
he takes all sorts of
приключенческие
adventure
романы,
novels,
значит,
all
всякие
sorts of fiction,
беллетристику,
feuilletons, well,
фельетоны,
everything in a
всё
row,
подряд,
popular
журналы,
science and entertainment
научно-популярные,
magazines.
развлекательные. Потом, спустя
Then, a
несколько
few
лет,
years later,
он
he begins
начинает
to
брать
take
себе в
dictionaries of
словари
foreign
иностранных
languages
языков
and
и
philosophical
философскую
literature.
литературу. И там
And
несколько
for
лет
several
он
years
грызет,
he reads and
читает эти
studies some
словари, потом
dictionaries,
Платона,
then
Аристотеля,
Plato,
кого-то еще,
Aristotle,
кого-то еще.
someone else.
Потом он берет
Then he
только
takes only
научную
scientific
литературу,
literature,
географические
geographical atlases,
атласы,
and chemical
химические
reference books.
справочники. То есть он
That
начинает
is, he
погружаться
begins
в
to
очень
immerse
серьезные
himself
какие-то
in some
вещи.
very
А
serious
на каком-то
things,
этапе
and at some
он образует
stage,
себе
he asked for
богословскую
theological
литературу,
literature,
святых
the Holy
отцов,
Fathers, and something
святых
like that.
а потом
And then the
Евангелие. И на
Gospel.
одном Евангелии он
And
там
he lived
жил,
there with one
там
gospel for
3,
3 or
5 или
5,
сколько лет.
or some number of years.
А
And after
после
that,
этого
he
он
again
опять
began
стал
to
брать
take all
всякую
kinds of
литературу,
literature,
там
some
Киноваты,
sheet
Талмуд,
music,
и так
began
далее.
to play
Короче,
music.
ну,
In
захотел
short,
знать, чем
well,
закончилось,
if you want to know
прочитать
how it all
рассказ
ended,
короткий.
read this story.
Так вот, в
It's
этом
short.
рассказе, как бы,
So in this
Чехов
story, Chekhov has a
располагает
ladder of reading
лестницу
ascent.
читательного восхождения. То есть, если
That
мы,
is,
вы,
if we,
я,
you, me,
мои
my
дети,
children,
там,
my
мои
parishioners,
прихожане,
your
ваши
children,
дети,
those who will hear
те,
us,
кто нас
read
услышит,
Dostoevsky, force
прочитают,
ourselves
заставят
to.
себя.
Well,
Заставлять
you will
себя
only
нужно
need to
будет
force
только первые
yourself for the
30
first
страниц,
30
потом тебя
pages,
засосет, и ты
then
не
you will
сможешь
be sucked
остановиться.
in and you will not be able to
Прочитали
stop. If we
Достоевского,
read
это будет
Dostoevsky,
только
it will be
одный
only
шаг.
one step.
Все книжки
All the
мира
books of the world are written so that a
написаны
person
для
may climb
того,
up through them to the
чтобы
Bible
человек
and then read only
поднялся
it,
по этим
mostly it,
книжкам
and
до
generally it,
Библии,
holding it close
и
like a
потом он
bride,
читал
kissing its
только
rosy
ее,
cheeks,
в основном
carrying it in his
ее,
arms like a
и
great treasure,
вообще
the Bible.
ее, как невесту ее лобызал в розовые щечки, значит, такой, носил ее на руках, как великое сокровище, Библию. Все книжки к этому
All books
идут.
lead to this.
Поэтому если
Therefore,
мы
if we
прочитаем
read
с вами
Dostoevsky with you,
Достоевского, а я мечтаю
and I
вообще,
dream,
вот,
actually,
например,
for
Россия
example,
будущего.
the Russia of the
То есть
future.
какой ты
As one
хочешь
man
быть
said,
Россия,
what do you want to be,
Россия
Russia?
Xerxes или
The Russia of
Христа?
Xerxes or of Christ?
Что,
For
например,
instance,
можно
what can be
сказать о
said about the
России
Russia of the
будущего? Какой вы хотите
future?
ее видеть?
What do you want her to
Ну,
be
понятно,
like?
чтобы не было
Well,
брошенных детей.
obviously, without abandoned children,
Понятно,
without
чтобы не было
abortions,
абортов.
with power plants
Понятно,
operating
чтобы
without accidents,
электростанции
with planes
работали
flying
без
and
аварий,
landing without crashes,
самолеты
with an
летали и
army
приземлялись
capable of
без
protecting us from any enemy,
катастроф,
with women
чтобы
giving
армия
birth
могла
and men
защитить
not
нас от
abandoning
любого
them.
врага, чтобы женщины рожали, мужчины их не бросали. Ну и так далее.
And so on and so forth,
Чтобы
with smart
у
mathematicians,
нас были
fast
и умные
athletes,
математики,
and everything
и
else.
быстрые спортсмены, вот, и все остальное. И
And
набожные
devout
монахи,
monks,
чтобы в воскресенье
so that
всё
everyone
лице.
goes to church on Sundays, and it is also very important that the whole of Russia reads the Bible, so that the whole, at least the whole of baptized Russia reads the Bible.
И вот и для этого
And
нам
that's
тоже
why we
нужен
also need
Достоевский.
Dostoevsky,
Потому что после
because there is
него
nothing to read after him.
читать уже нечего. Если
If
ты
you read
прочтешь
Dostoevsky, I
Достоевского,
apologize,
я
you won't
извиняюсь,
read anyone
какого-нибудь
like Louis
там
Boussinard or
Луи
Paul de
Бусинара,
Kock,
какого-нибудь или
about
Поля де
whom
Кока,
Dostoevsky
о
wrote a
котором
lot,
уже много
or
песен,
someone,
какого-нибудь,
pardon
не
me,
знаю,
from contemporary
Ардон,
writers. I
какой-то
don't
там
want to disgrace their names
современных,
once
не хочу
again.
лишний
You
раз
won't read
позорить
them.
их имена авторов, ты читать их не будешь.
After Dostoevsky,
После
excuse
Достоевского,
me,
извините. Кто
whoever
кушает
has tasted
вкусное,
something
будет вкусное
delicious
кушать
will
больше
no
не
longer
будет.
want to eat something
Достоевский
tasteless. That is,
отсечет от вас
Dostoevsky will cut
кучу
off a bunch of
грязных
dirty husks
книг.
from you.
И после этого
And
вам
after
останется
that,
читать
you will only have to
только
read eternal
вечные
books.
книги.
Plato
Вот
can still be
Платона
read,
еще можно
and Blessed
читать.
Augustine can be
Блаженного
read.
Августина можно будет читать. И, конечно,
And
нужно
of
будет
course,
читать
one will
Евангелие.
need to read the
Но
Gospel.
вот всё
But as for
остальное,
everything else, you definitely
вот
won't
этого вы
read
читать
that.
точно не будете. Поэтому он
Therefore, he will
целомудрит вашу
chaste your
душу,
soul,
настроит
tune
ее
it like a
на
tuning
то, а
fork,
самого его
and he
нужно
himself
читать
needs to be
для
read in
того,
order
чтобы
for
все
everyone
после
after
него
him to
читали
read the Bible.
Библию. Когда-то
Once
умирал
Walter
Вальтер
Scott was
Скотт,
dying, and he asked his
спросил
children,
детей своих: дети, дайте мне книгу.
"Children, give me the book."
Они говорят: какую
They
книгу?
say,
Дайте папу,
"Which
говорит,
book, Dad?
25 тысяч книг.
You have 25,000
Он
books
говорит: дети,
here."
есть только одна
He
книга.
says, "Children, there is only one book,
Вот ее мне и дай.
so give it to me."
Это, сами понимаете,
Obviously,
это Библия.
it's the Bible,
А остальное
and
это
the rest
что?
is what?
Это комментарии.
These are comments.
Это
These are
комментарии
comments on various separate
разных
aspects of
отдельных
everything
сторон
that is
всего
already
того,
in the
что уже
Bible.
есть в Библии. Например,
For example, you know that
целые
entire books
книжки
are written for the
пишутся
sake
ради
of one
одной
thought.
мысли. Вот ты прочел
Here,
эту книжку,
for example, you
и у вас
finished reading a
вопрос
book, and a
возникает:
question arises,
какую
what
мысль
idea
я
did I
оттуда
take away
вынес?
from it?
Что я
What did I
почувствовал, что я
feel?
понял, в конце концов?
What did I understand,
Вот
in the
обычно
end?
эту
Usually, this
мысль
thought is put into the
выносят
epigraph of a
в
book, and, as a
эпиграф
rule, it is one
книги.
from the
И,
Gospel
как
or from from the Bible, from the Old Testament.
Из Ветхого Завета. Вот, например,
For example,
Анна
Anna Karenina,
Karenina,
what was it written for?
там написано в
It
начале
says at the
прям
beginning, right in the
«Мне
epigraph,
отпущение
vengeance is mine,
воздам».
I will repay.
То есть, я буду
That
мстить.
is, I will take
Я
revenge.
мститель, говорит
I am the
Господь.
avenger,
Там книга
says the Lord.
Второзакония.
The book of
Вот эта
Deuteronomy.
книга вся
The whole
написана
book
для
is written
этого,
precisely
чтобы
for
ты
this,
эту
for you to grasp
мысль
this idea.
уяснил. И всё.
And that's all. A thick book like this is written for the sake of one idea. Every thought from the Bible can turn into such a book. Therefore, when you read such thick books, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then eventually you come to the point that from each of these books, you take 1 or 2 thoughts, and all of them are already in the Bible. As a rule, they are also placed in the epigraph of those books that you have read. Therefore, sooner or later, all our reading must come to the Bible. And I really want everyone to read it. Of course, the young, educated and literate, physicists, chemists, writers, humanists, and, of course, the elderly. So that the grandma sitting by the window doesn't crack seeds, but sits with her glasses and reads the Book of Job. And so that the grandpa doesn't run away to the garage to tinker with nonsense, but also sits in his room with glasses and reads the Book of Wisdom of Solomon. And so that grandchildren read the Holy Gospel in the morning and the Psalms of David in the evening, and so that we would have something to talk about. You know? So that we would have something to talk about. Because there is no meaning in life without the Lord Jesus Christ, and there is no reason for a person to live if he does not read these main texts. So we need Dostoevsky as a ladder to the Bible. And when we, the whole of Russia, all together, all the people, the old and the young, the builders on duty during their break, and the sailors in a submarine during their rest, when we all have pocket-sized holy gospels, the word of God, when we will not be afraid to die, then at some point we will even stop reading. We will already be so good that the gospel will be inside us. Because the point is not to read it, the point is to memorize it, to eat it and to live by it. So that it would enter into you, and so that the book would no longer be near you, but the gospel would be in you. Starting out, one should begin precisely with Dostoevsky. By the way, one of the people of the Silver Age, a poet, said, I think it was. I won't lie, I'll be wrong. In short, he said, we read a lot in our youth, we read this, that, and that. But we didn't read Dostoevsky. We ate Dostoevsky. He was our nourishment. Yes, he is perhaps the only one you can just feed on. By the way, Gogol is like that too. There's actually such a rule, you know, to read not many, but much. Because if you read something when you were 20 and you're now 45, it's as if you never read it at all. Reread some big books again. For example, I had a friend who went on a long business trip and there was nothing to read but And Quiet Flows the Don. Well, nothing to read but a brilliant work. And he says, I read it at the age of 20, and he was already 45 or something, maybe 50. He says, I read it anew, with new eyes, with such pleasure, with such rapture. So you read the same thing all over again. I had one friend, I don't get tired of talking about him. He read Dead Souls once or twice every year. I wonder, what is there to read every year? Well, read it once and calm down. And he read it every year, and every time he found more and more new revelations there. Because the dead souls are not what Chichikov buys. Dead souls are the people who move and walk there. The Sobakevich and the Korobochkas, these are the dead souls. This is also an important principle, that is, the question is not about reading a lot. Because there are so many books, when I enter any library, any bookstore, I am seized with panic because I realize that I will never read it all. And I have a certain greed, I would like to read it all. Well, at least a little bit. You know, as in the Ukrainian joke, what I don't eat, I bite. At least to flip through. And I understand that I won't even have time to skim through this entire ocean of literature. And then I realize that this is not necessary, because you can read the same book all your life. Close it, turn it over, read it again. There are such books. They may be different for you. For example, I discovered Thomas Mann for myself. What a grandiose writer, even in translation. I do not know German to read in it. So Fyodor Mikhailovich is also like that. In general, Russia should be a land of books. Books! Orlov Mishka had a lot of books, in his cozy little nook. Or,
Один мних
There was a
много
monk with
книг.
books galore, he slept on them, but knew no more what pages held what words were writ, he found no
Россия
time to
книги
read a bit.
рассчитана быть читающей страной.
So, the Russia
Так,
of
чтобы в
books.
метро опять мы видели
Russia should be a
людей,
reading
которые
country,
играются в
so that
гаджеты.
in the subway we would not see again
Опять
people
сидели
playing
бы
with
люди,
gadgets, but people would again sit, choo choo, choo choo, and read.
Кстати
By the
говоря,
way, not so long ago I saw such a photo reportage by a New York street photographer who takes pictures of what people read in the New York
уличного
subway.
фотографа, который в подземке Нью-Йорка фотографирует, что читают люди. Вы
You will be
удивитесь.
surprised. Not everything is so bad in the state of Denmark. That is, there are people there too. And they have a soul. And the soul requires spiritual food, and they are looking for this food. By the way, the New York subway itself, I swear to you as an eyewitness, is such a cesspool that it's scary to go there compared to our metro. Our metro is some kind of Congress palace, a royal palace. And there it is a nightmare. There, when you descend into the subway, there is only one dream, to just get outside. This is some kind of infernal phenomenon. Terrible, dirty, So in this New York subway, imagine, there are lots of photos. He took photos in a way that the titles on the spines were visible. There is, for example, some 2-meter Negro with a book, and there, let's say, is sailing as The Catcher in the Rye. This is a great book, a very great book. This book, well, it's one of the foundations of American literature and of modern civilization as well. Or there's a girl standing or sitting there reading, say, some Camus essays. This is good literature, heavy but good. Or, let's say someone is standing there, some guy with long hair, he also has a book by Schopenhauer. And, mind you, paper books, not electronic ones, paper books. Somebody is reading Schopenhauer or Kant. Yes, in America, in the American subway with a paper book. And if such people exist, it means that life will continue, including for them. Because when a person reads a good book, it is a guarantee that they will live on. And when people print good books, it means that civilization will continue to live. Because somebody needs to read these good books. And that's what they're printed for, you know, and when you read it, you will remember and do it. And that's when the thing will happen, for the sake of which all this is done. So in general, a book is a guarantee of the future. A good book. Overall, I believe my motivational part is fully exhausted at this point. If you have any questions about the topic of our conversation, then it's not a sin to ask.
Не грешно разрешается.